How's it going, everyone? Welcome to our first drawing tutorial of 2018. I need to get in the habit of saying that, but a lot of you have been requesting this one. We're going to start with a realistic skin texture tutorial, and I've been meaning to do it for a while. I just couldn't figure out the best way to go about putting it together. I think I was just overthinking it, so I've decided just to at least throw something together, and hopefully you can take something away from it. But I'll go ahead and walk you through this whole process that I usually use when it comes to drawing skin texture. Okay, so I'm going to be working from this reference image of myself, and I couldn't find a good image to use online, so I decided just to use the camera and take this photo, and then we can just use this to focus on drawing the skin texture. I actually put the image onto the computer screen so I could zoom all the way in and see a lot of detail, and that's always helpful. Now right now I'm just starting off by outlining the head here and just putting things together before we look at drawing the skin. One thing we should know is that there's all types of different skin texture, like I said earlier, and it varies from older people to much younger people, and so the techniques we use tend to change. Now that I have sketched in the overall shape of the face and marked on the position of the facial features, I can start focusing on creating this skin texture. So I'm going to start off by firstly getting a 2H pencil. I'll explain all the materials I'm using as I go along. However, with this 2H pencil, I'm going to lightly create an overall base layer. This is going to be all over the face, and a 2H is good for this because it's not going to create any dark shades. We are just lightly applying this to the paper and trying to keep it consistent. From looking at your reference image, you could try to recognise the direction of the skin texture, and so you can create strokes with your pencil in similar directions, taking in consideration the shadows and highlights on the image. So for example, on the image I'm drawing, there is a lot of shadow around the eye and below the nose, so basically just the places where we commonly see slight shadow due to the facial features. Now here we can apply a bit more pressure in these areas so we get darker shades. This is just a simple base layer, so don't worry too much about everything yet. I sometimes work into this with a few more layers just to indicate where the shadows would be. I'd mainly try focusing on creating a smooth layer of pencil, consisting of pencil strokes in different directions, relating to how the skin seems to form on the face, or whatever it is you are drawing. Also remember to try and show the areas with shadow and also the highlighted areas of the skin. It doesn't need to be anything too permanent because we can create a better effect for shadows and for highlights when we come to adding more onto this. But now we have a base layer down and we can start building on top of it. Before I start texturing the skin, I'm going to go ahead and render some of the facial features real quick, and I'm also going to put this into time lapse because I want to focus the majority of this video on the realistic skin texture. However, when it comes to drawing detailed elements like this, you want to make sure that you are using a sharp pencil. I've also swapped out the 2H for a 2B pencil here so I can work on top of the base layer with it being more darker. You'll probably find that you'll be sharpening softer pencils like this a lot more, but it's good to keep it to a sharp point, especially when drawing in eyelashes and the eyebrows. The darker marks also make it stand out from the light base layer. So this is in time lapse. I'll go ahead and let this play out, and then once this is done we can get right into creating that skin texture. Okay, so we have finished drawing in the facial features in all of its detail, and now all that's really missing is the skin texture. I haven't drawn in the pupil or the hair yet, but that doesn't really matter. I might come and finish that off later, but to start with the texture, we have already got our base layer, and now I'm going to take a 2H pencil again. Throughout this stage I'll be switching to and from the 2H and a 2B pencil. Now I'm going to go ahead and start with this section under the eye, and if you look closely on the reference image to the left here, you can see that this part of the skin, the bottom eyelid, has a different texture compared to the rest of the face. Before you start jumping straight in with the drawing, look at your reference image if you are using one and how the skin texture changes. On here it almost appears as these small circular markings, and so you want to try and study the skin to recognise these small details. The whole point of this is that we are recreating the same effect over on our drawing. It's really just about knowing the best way and technique to do that. So with the drawing I take the 2H and work into the base layer, creating similar looking marks. Now these marks won't stand out too much because we are working into it with the same shade as the actual base layer, but by applying more pressure we can start to notice that it's laying on top of the base layer and creating more of a texture. Keep referring to the reference image, look at the way the texture appears and changes with the direction of the skin. I sometimes start alternating the kind of marks I'm making with the pencil. You can see how eventually this eyelid area fades into a more smoother skin texture, and as we work into more areas of the face. The cheeks tend to have the smoothest texture, but it can always vary from person to person. So as I work through this, I'll slow down some areas so you can see the technique I use to create more of a textured appearance. Also, I'm going to add some real-time footage at the end of this video because I know that a lot of you have requested that in past tutorials. It might get a little bit boring watching that, but if you feel like it will help you out, it's there if you need it. It mainly involves looking at the reference image and really observing the small details that are seen there and trying to create similar marks with the pencil. It doesn't have to be exact, as long as you keep considering how dark and light you are making these marks, and also the direction you are placing them, then everything should come together. Naturally the face changes and the skin wraps and forms around facial features and the muscle, so try and keep that in mind. As we get to areas that are under more of a shadow, the same texture is still used, except this time it can be a lot more subtle. When you see darker areas, for example on this image near the side of the cheek where the cheekbone is, there is some slight shadowing. Use a 2B or any suitable pencil that will help you achieve those similar shades. I have a video focusing on pencil grades and the shadows they give you, so watch that to understand how they work if you are not too sure. An area of the face where the texture also changes in appearance is the nose. These skin pores, which we was originally creating with small random marks, have become a lot more separated and specific. So when it comes to things like this, try to focus on accuracy and take time to place each mark with the pencil. You'll sometimes see a contrast between the pencil marks we create and also the base layer that we made previously. On the nose here, it's under a lot more light, so I didn't apply much of a base layer here at the start. The texture changes as it interacts with light and shadow. Keep referring to the image you are drawing and looking at the small details. It's a really slow process, but the results will be better the more time you spend on it. So now this is pretty much finished, but I usually take a step back and compare with the reference. I touch up some areas by sometimes making the shadows more obvious, and I also might take a blending stump and blend some areas. I also think I forgot to mention using a blending stump on the base layer at the start as well. Now to finish this off, I'll go and draw in some hair. It's not really relevant for this tutorial, but I might as well finish this off. So whilst this plays out, remember that I've also included some real-time footage at the end after the end screen. It's there if you need it, but I hope I've clearly explained the process I had taken for this specific drawing. Other than that, this pretty much concludes this overall tutorial. So there we go, that is one way to create a realistic skin texture, and we'll probably end up doing some more tutorials covering different types of skin textures, and we'll also go through some different techniques that help you achieve different effects. But I hope you enjoyed this and found it somewhat useful. If you could leave a like, I'd really appreciate that. And I've also been uploading quite a bit on the channel recently, so go check out the other content if you think you'd be interested. Other than that, have yourself a great day, and I will see you in the next one.